So this morning was the plenary session for actually the first of the opening plenary session for the National Council for Science and the Environment. And the plenary session was about looking at the response and the cascading results of the earthquake and tsunami disaster in Japan in 2011.
I think there was a good cross-section of panelists that were able to talk about not just the disaster that occurred in Japan, but the reach of that disaster, whether it's into the scientific realm or whether it has to do with other companies and other sectors than energy or those directly affected by the tremendous earthquake, tsunami, and combination of nuclear disasters.
Well, I think it's interesting to note that each one of these different folks that did make a presentation obviously expressed very different views of what happens in a disaster and what happens following a disaster. So I think one takeaway is that it's not just one unified front, that there are many different perspectives that need to be brought out.
In the case of what occurred in Japan, when we talk about, whether we're talking about the earthquake, the tsunamis, or the nuclear accident itself, the idea that something of that magnitude could occur needs to be part of the conversation. I thought there was a great point made by the panelists that mentioned that not everything could be trained to, and that's very true. But training individuals on how to cope with very demanding situations like that would be of great benefit.
I think that what the entire plenary session did was express this wide diversity of needs and potential needs for study. So every one of us that's here, we are coming to this with our own particular disciplines, our own particular interests. I'm an academic, I want to know how do I teach this kind of stuff. And it's very helpful to see the wide array of administration, of response, that this is a much larger sort of global response. But it's also interesting to place that in balance to what our keynote speaker said, which is that this is a local problem as well as a sort of a global way of thinking.
The world is seeing external events, natural and man-made disasters on a scale that none of us believe we've seen in recent memory. So the idea that we're going to see another one, almost certain. The question is where and when, and is this going to impact an underdeveloped country that may be very vulnerable or more developed countries that are more resilient? And what are we doing to try and achieve a level of resilience across the world that will help us all?